Minute. Okay. Oh yeah, they've got it. I've got to still let them in. Hello, Reb Gedalia. Shelley, I think you're in. Hello, Shelley.
Hi.
Kelly, evening.
Hi, Gary.
Hi.
Okay, we're just loading up here.
I'm
Okay.
free tonight because he's tied up.
I could
I'm free
interpret
tonight.
that in many,
My
many different
Saffron's
ways.
tied up. So
Rabbi Suffin. Oh,
yeah,
does he give a Wednesday night as well?
yeah. That's why I can't. That's why
Oh, I see. Oh,
I don't.
okay. Very good.
I don't think it would be appropriate to watch two at the same time, even if I could.
Yeah, multitasking. Yeah, that's tricky. Okay, right. So just to let you know, Shelley and Gary, this is on YouTube, so they can see you on YouTube. Does that make sense? They can see me giving the share, but they can also see you guys in the background. So if you need to fall asleep or something, that's fine, but
Right.
it might get recorded.
Do it quietly.
Yeah, very good. Okay, and in the house we have so we have a few people here live in Shaw as well.
They're alive. Are they good? I'm pleased about that.
Yeah.
Let us see.
Right, so Parshas Bow, or Boy, if you prefer, whatever rocks your boat.
That's good.
Boy is just more of the the oys.
As a masculine, boy.
Oh, boy, like boy shalom. Yeah,
We're just saying to the bride, but to the female.
yeah, but the cholam, some people pronounce it as cholam, others make more of an oi, cholam. Yeah. So I'm just thinking an example. So you could say kos, a cup, a kos, or you could say a kois. It just depends. Yeah, it's just how you pronounce it. Yeah. Or the saf or the taf. There's another common. Are you a Shabbos man or you a Shabbat man? Or yitzkadal or yitzkadal. So it depends on the how long ago you learned and who your rabbi was or teacher. Okay, so just as a background, the plagues. We have the last three plagues. I would say the game changers. These are the big ones. Yeah, locusts, darkness. Well, definitely darkness and the death of the firstborn. Just as a bit of background information, we often think the plagues happened sort of back to back, but there was generally every plague, there are exceptions, had a 3-week warning period. Moshe warned Pharaoh for 3 weeks. If you don't let us go, there's going to be a plague, whatever it was. And then the plague would last a week. Yeah. So that was the case with blood and frogs. 3 weeks of warning, then 1 week of the plague of blood, 1 week of the plague of frogs. Plagues 369. Sorry, some people still joining. Plagues numbers 3, 6, and 9. So 3 was lice, 6 was boils, and 9 was darkness. There was no warning period. Just Moshe said, or that the plague just started on that day. Yeah. Pharaoh didn't get a warning. Hail. Sorry, we're number 7 is locust. Locust is the only exception to both of these, where Moshe said machar, tomorrow this is going to happen. So he got 1 day warning. Either way, the plagues were spread out over a whole year. Rosh Chodesh Nisan was blood, 1st of Nisan, and obviously the Jews left 15th of Nisan a year and a few weeks later. So it was a whole year. It was ongoing. It wasn't sort of a few weeks, all the plagues. It was a constant thing for a whole year. The Egyptians were suffering because Pharaoh was refusing, was being obstinate.
I suppose that kind of works out. So 3 weeks, 3 times 10 plagues, right? It's 30.
Yeah.
Between each another 10, 40. And then there must have been some kind of
there must have been some gaps in between plagues as well. It wasn't one plague finished and then straight away the warning for the next one. Obviously sometimes there was a bit of a break as well. But yeah,
some of them might have lasted some time.
Yeah, the longest they lasted was a week, and the shortest was death of the firstborn, which was just that midnight, and then darkness was 6 days, not 7. Okay, slight change there. already in this week's Parsha, the Egyptian ministers have had enough. Yeah, they're telling Pharaoh now, Egypt is lost. We pick up in chapter 10, verse 7. Chapter 10, verse 7. For those on Zoom, if you'll need a Chumash. And hopefully you're getting used to how the chapters and verses work. Of course, each book of the 5 books of Torah, it starts again with chapter 1. So Genesis will be chapter 1. And then in Shema, it'll start again with chapter 1 and Vayikra, etc. Yeah, it's not one continuous thing that the chapters keep rolling all the way through. At the end of a book, the chapters reset. It's funny, actually, the chapters and the verses are not according to Jewish tradition. It's something that the Christians set up, but we just carried on using it as a source of reference, as something to refer to the chapters and verses by. But according to Jewish tradition, the chapters in the Torah, you can see that when the Torah is held up, the gaps in the page, when the line breaks, 2 types of breaks, you'll have a gap of 9-letter break, which is called a stuma. It's closed in, like you'll see the gap in the line. And then you have patucha, where the line will finish and it'll be empty to the end of the line, and then it'll start on the next line down. And obviously in between books of the Torah, there's more of a gap as well. That's wherever paragraph breaks are there, that's according to our tradition. But it's useful to have just to say chapter 10 verse thing, and you can find it easily in a Chumash. So we carried on using it. So yeah, chapter 10 verse 7. This is after Moshe had warned Pharaoh that there's going to be this plague of locusts. So they've heard that it's coming. Vayomru Avdei Pharaoh Elav. And the servants of Pharaoh, or his ministers, said to him, Ad Masai, until when? Yezeh lanu l'makesh. Will this man, Moshe, be a trap for us? Because every time you say no to him, he brings plagues. Shalach es anashim, send out these people, meaning the Jews, the Yavdu es Hashem Eloheihem, and they should serve their God. Haterim Teidar, do you not already know? Ki Avda Mitzrayim, that Egypt is lost. We've lost. We're getting battered. We're getting smashed and crushed. We've got nothing left. The locust is going to eat up anything that happens to be left, that was left over from the hail. Is enough already. Let them go. When your inner circle start telling you, okay, you've messed up here. But Pharaoh, as we know, refused to listen. And it's it's useful to compare it to modern day examples as well. So we know, and Rabbi Sachs mentions this in his footnotes here, that when Hitler, Yimach Shemoy, saw...
Did you say Yimach Shemoy?
Yimach Shemoy means that his name should be erased. Yeah. That he saw that, he was losing the war. He still diverted trains from going to the Russian front to transport Jews to Auschwitz instead. So he knew it was going to be detrimental to the war effort, but he was so hell-bent on getting rid of the Jews that he was prepared to lose the war, and eventually, Germany fell much quicker than it would have done if he'd tried to actually focus on the war. So that is, we see this time and again. Tyrants are held captive by their irrational hatred. And yeah, it's a shame. So Pharaoh was another example of this. He was the prototype, if you like. I can see Lindsay's trying to find the link, but I'm already on. So I'm just trying to think if I can send it to him. Okay, bear with me 1 second. Just going to send him the flyer. Sure. Sure. To Lindsay. Okay, said. Right, we're back on. Okay, apologies. Right. Interesting about locusts here, it says in the footnote here, the desert locust, this is in the New Sachs or the Conrad Morris edition that the Shul was gifted about 200 copies a few weeks ago. It says in the footnote here on chapter 10 verse 4, for the people here you can see that on the first page. Can you see that it says locusts?
Mm-hmm.
It says the desert locust is a devastating visitor to the Middle East, Africa, and Asia even today. A swarm can be 460 square miles in size and contain between 40 and 80 million locusts in less than half a square mile. Each locust can eat its weight in plants each day. So a swarm of this size would eat 423 million pounds of plants every day. Egypt was ravaged by them from time to time. So you could say this plague, and I remember seeing years ago on I think the Discovery Channel, they tried to explain according to, or in a natural way, how the plagues could have taken place without them necessarily having to be miraculous. So locusts, you could understand, it happens. Darkness, maybe some sort of sandstorm, comes over. Wild animals, a bit trickier in the desert. Blood, I'm not sure how that would do the whole Nile into blood, or frogs. But this it brings us to a sort of more philosophical question. The 10 plagues are very clear. It's not some sort of analogy for anything. It's these plagues, according to the Torah, happened. And we celebrate Pesach and we go through them every year, Seder nights. But how many of us really believe that these plagues happened? Or next week's Parsha that the sea split, or the manna fell from heaven, or that God came down on Mount Sinai, or Bilam's donkey spoke. Shrek. The Shrek the film. They got that from us. So it's hard to sometimes grapple with these miracles because we don't see things like that nowadays. So people often will say, "Well, do you seriously believe that the 10 plagues happened in Egypt, that the sea split, and etc., etc.?" But it depends on how you see miracles to start with, or how you view the universe. If you're already comfortable with the idea that God created the universe and he can do anything, and he set up nature, there is a general, the sun rises, the sun sets, etc., and everything that follows a pattern. And if God wants, he can suspend the laws of nature and do miracles, and it's not such a big deal. But the question still stands, and I'm sure many you all have this here. Why don't we get to see miracles like that nowadays? Could we just have one or a few, and that would just make things a little bit easier to believe in, that all these things happened all that time ago? Any comments on that? It'd be nice to see
I think a while ago I asked you a similar thing.
Yeah.
Probably Kabush or something. I said people deal with it when they're like very scientifically minded, and they might not even be creationists. They might be more evolutionists.
Yeah.
How can they relate? How can people like that relate to these kind of stories? I can't remember your answer, so I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I think I mentioned the main ones. By the way, when the sea split, there was a sort of a minor version of the sea splitting when the Jews eventually crossed over into the land of Israel under Joshua's leadership. The Yarden, the Jordan, also split. So it happened twice. Obviously, that wasn't as dramatic. First of all, what I would say is even all those miracles that happened way back when, and the giving of the Torah, the Ten Commandments, etc. 40 days later, what happened after the Torah was given? Well, at least the Ten Commandments, the golden calf. Thank you, Lindsay. So they saw all these wonders, all these miracles, and yet along the way, even on the way out, as they came to the sea before it split, they were complaining, "Oh, well, there are not enough graves in Egypt. Why did you bring us here that we should die next to this, in the desert?" And
didn't it happen even before the golden calf? As soon as they got out of the sea within a few days, they were complaining that there were no water in the Midbar shore that they were in.
Yeah, they were saying there's no water here. They were platzing. You've just seen God, all the wonders, all the signs, all the plagues, split the sea. The Egyptians are gone, and you're still finding somehow you're complaining that God doesn't have this under control. So, and then the golden calf.
The pressure off the rest of us and of Israel.
Yeah, now we know where we get it. It's a genetic complaining. Yeah, it's in the DNA. So you see, even if God performs all these things, we still complain and we still don't take it to heart. And then the golden calf is one of the biggest sins in national history, to, so to speak, have an affair with something else and and forget about God. So you could argue that when God does miracles, we'll talk about why and when he chooses to do miracles that break nature, but it doesn't necessarily help because it's like a flash in the pan. It's a moment of inspiration and then it dissipates and it doesn't sink in. It's an amazing experience, but then it comes and it goes, and then the people are the same as they were beforehand, which is problematic.
But nowhere in the Torah did God ever appear in human form to anybody, right?
Correct.
At all.
Yeah.
The nearest that was where Moshe was on the mountain, he, saw the burning bush and he heard God's voice.
Yeah.
But nowhere did anyone ever see.
There. I mean, there are ideas of, angels like the Arabs that came to Abraham in the form of humans, but they were actually angels, or things like that. We have the idea of angels, but yeah, God never comes in human form. Correct. That is one of the 13 principles of faith. Yeah, that God has no. We say it in Yigdal. Yeah, no form, no human form or anything like that. That's very much a Christian idea. But where the other question that comes from this is, why does God choose to do miracles in certain times of our history? Like, why the manna from heaven? Why the plagues in Egypt? Why split the Jordan River or split the sea? Why should Bilam's donkey talk? God prefers to work through nature and only breaks the laws of nature that he set up if there is a specific message he wants to get across to mankind or the Jewish people or the world at large. So in Egypt, you could understand why God might want to do miracles. And it says clearly why last week. Here yes, yes, most sai, that's right. God says, I'm going to increase my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt, so the Egyptians should know that I am God. The Pharaoh should realize that the superpower at the time, Egypt, that they, although they might reject God and that they worship idols, he says, I'm going to show them that I am boss. Yeah. And that became, once God did that once, that should be enough for people to learn the lesson.
You said about the God in human form was a Christian idea, but didn't we have the thing where Moses saw God's back, which implies?
Oh yeah, very good.
There.
Yeah, in Kitisa, he says he saw God speak sort of acharai, the backwards part of God. It says that he saw an image of God wearing tefillin, like he saw the knot of the tefillin on whatever that means in a spiritual version of that. Yeah.
Sorry, Moses.
So we have this idea that all the mitzvahs we keep, God also keeps, which is an interesting idea. So just as like we put tefillin on, he puts tefillin on. But obviously his tefillin aren't physical black boxes, and what's written in his tefillin are different to what's in ours. Like in his tefillin it says, mi goy, mi ka'amech, me, who is like the Jewish people, basically. Like he's extolling our praises, to find the exact expression. We say it Shabbos Mincha.
Where does that?
It's also in the Torah. Verses from the Torah. While I'm trying to quote it, I'll quote it right. Yeah, very good. Umika Amcha Israel, Goyech Haaretz. Who is like your nation, Israel, a unique nation on the world, on earth. So these verses are written in God's tefillin rather. But exactly what it means that Moshe saw God. He saw a revelation of Hashem. He saw a revelation, but not an actual physical mass of Adam, human flesh. That for sure not. But it is a good question. What did the Jewish people see when the Torah was given? They saw all the seven heavens opened up and God's presence rested on the mountain. What did they see? It's hard to know. It's hard to try to get into words. Well, yeah, the mountain there was thunder and lightning, and it was a big event. But and it says that God was tried to give the first two commandments. I am the Lord your God, you shall have no other gods. And the Jewish people, it says in the Medrash that they couldn't, it was too much and they were passing out. They were dying on the spot. So they said, okay, Moshe, you say the rest. you can say the rest of the 10 commandments. But the experience was so intense that it was almost too much. And the souls were just leaving their bodies because they were like wanting to cleave. The souls wanting to go back to their source, which was God himself. Now, just to touch briefly on why various miracles, God chose to do miracles at certain points in Jewish history. So the plagues were to show that God has dominion over the world. and that the whole world saw that. The manna from heaven mentioned earlier is to prove or to show that God provides our sustenance. Even though we might work and get a job and we make money and buy food and buy a house, whatever it might be, we have to remember that really all of our sustenance, the channels of the blessings, all come from God. That's the idea of manna as a one-off miracle. Jericho, so that's another big miracle, top 10 definitely. When the Jewish people crossed under Joshua's leadership, their first battle was against Jericho, the city, which was considered the lock of the land. If you conquered Jericho, you had sort of a strategical advantage over the whole land of Israel. And they didn't actually fight. They just went round the city limits, around the sort of the walls of the city 7 times, and blowing shofar. And on the 7th time, which I believe was on Shabbos, the walls of the city just sunk into the ground. That was the miracle. And then they went in and captured it. One of the reasons why a kala goes around the groom, the chosin, 7 times is. I don't know if you did you hear that on Zoom? Maybe we'll move on. The idea that all boundaries should be removed, all the baggage from previous life experience. One of the ideas is going around 7 times to remove any sort of defenses a person has and become vulnerable, and to let the bride in, and vice versa, the group. So there's a nice idea, but why did God do a miracle there? Not any of the other conquests of the land of Israel. The rest they had to fight, properly without any help. It was to again prove a point, a one-off miracle, to show them that the conquest of the land of Israel is because God is behind the Jewish people. God says, you will conquer this land, I am behind you, you will be successful. And we'll start off with a miracle to show you that is the case. But from now on, you'll have to fight yourselves, but you'll know if you go and you trust in me and you do what I say, you will conquer all these nations.
Do you feel that the whole October the 17th, the war, and I mean, I personally, I feel that it's pretty miraculous what we came through, or what Israel came through, and where Israel is now. They've got back control of their homeland. There's no imminent, except for the nutcases in Iran, but they've got their own stuff to deal with. They've got no imminent threat now. We prayed hard, not just us, the Jewish people prayed hard, for success and to overcome the enemy and whatever. It feels pretty miraculous to me.
So I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, so these miracles, they are still through natural means, because we have the Iron Dome, or because we have Mossad, or because we have a very advanced army, technologically, etc. So you could or the 6-day war, or really any war that if we lose is the end of the state. You say every one of these is for sure a miracle, definitely. But the fact that Israel controls the whole airspace of Iran, and how that war happened, the 12-day war, is all miracles, of course. But people there'll always be that sort of space, or that place to say, yeah, but the Arabs are disorganized, or
How many times are they disorganized? You see this? Who started the war? Who won the war?
Or it's because of the American aid, or because of this. There's always a way of turning it to say that there are no miracles here. It's a bit like Purim, the Purim story. If you want, you could say the Jews are lucky that he happened to pick Queen Esther of all the girls in the empire, and that Mordecai saved the king's life, but wasn't rewarded until right at the time when he needed to be rewarded, because Haman was about to come and ask for him to be killed, etc., etc. And everything clearly is orchestrated from God above, like he's the master puppeteer. But if you want to, you could just view it as consequences. The Jews were lucky, etc. And that is life in general. You can go through life and just sort of miss all the signs and not really be awake and be asleep. Or you can join the dots and say, clearly God is on the side of the Jews. But then you could counter back and say, well, then why the Holocaust, or why all the suffering? So, but these big miracles that are clearly breaking nature that we don't see nowadays, They were set as precedents back in the day to show either that God provides the manna, or that God has dominion over the world. That's all the plagues, or that God, if God wants us to conquer the land of Israel, and it's ours, and He's given it to us, He showed us right from the inception that He is going to be with us and make it happen. And the first victory was miraculous, but after that, we then have to work with nature, and that is how God prefers to work, within the laws of nature. And that comes back to the first point we made, because if God is doing miracles the whole time, let's say like He was in Egypt and through the desert, the 40 years as they traveled with the clouds of glory.
The Jews would just become dependent. They would just say,
Yeah.
we don't need to do anything because God will just do it for us.
God will provide. Yeah, it's a bit like, I don't need to go and work. God will provide, or whatever the example is. I don't need to work on my connection with God or internalizing my connection, because it's always just from above downwards, where we need to cultivate.
Abraham at the Acadia, didn't it?
Oh, you say, so that's a good example where we have to cultivate it from ourselves, like Abraham with Isaac. Yeah, he trusted in God so much, but he still went through the process. God's saying, sacrifice my son, even though He said that my offspring, the progeny, will only come through this son. How's that going to work? But because he worked on himself to that extent, he was able to.
Didn't Yitzchak say that when he said, "Where's the lamb for slaughter?" And Abraham said, "God will provide."
Oh yeah. God will show us. Yeah. Although at that point, Yitzchak twigged what he meant. Yeah, and we have to remember Yitzchak at that point, I think, was 37. He was a grown man, so it wasn't stupid. It wasn't like kidding a little child. Okay, well, we'll find one. At that point, he realized what was going on. But yeah, this idea of, there's two ways we can serve God. One is bottom up, where we work on our connection with God and we contemplate about how great He is and how He's involved with every step along the way in our own lives, and nothing is random, etc. Or we sit back and we just sort of almost like going to the cinema and eating popcorn and watching all the marvels, and you could see everything that's happened since October 7th. In fact, they were fighting a war on 7 fronts and being unbelievably successful, and the economy still managed to increase during this time, and the startup nation, and always been attacked, and somehow pioneers in so many ways, and just be like, oh wow, it's cool, isn't it? But it's not affected you. It's just you're like a backseat driver. You're not involved. So that's why miracles, although it would be lovely to have miracles all the time in a revealed way, in a way that they break nature, if the UN would just sort of sink into the ground or whatever it would be, that isn't how God operates. He wants us to work to find Him through nature and to cultivate that relationship. Okay, so that was more of a philosophical question, or look at miracles in general. But no doubt, we're living in a time where the miracles are everywhere if you choose to see them. Yeah, and the universe in general, you could look at the world and say, as people do, somehow it was a big bang and it happened, and don't start complicating things, saying there has to be a God and there has to be a designer. But if you're real and you realize how complex the universe is, or the eye, or the brain, or gravity, and that it all came together, it's in my mind, it's ridiculous to suggest that it could randomly come together and there was nothing to it. It's a bit like you take apart a car, all the parts of a car or a mobile phone, and you give it a shake in a box, and it would just somehow come together as a car or as a phone. And the universe is 10 times more complicated than
a bit more than 10 times,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's
hundreds of times, thousands of times.
Sue does my head in when she says, well, she often asks me, this is regularly, she'd said to me, all right, so the Big Bang, the beginning of the universe. Okay, yeah. So there was a Big Bang. So let's say that was God who made the Big Bang.
Yeah.
Then she'll say, but who created God?
Yeah.
And what's outside of space, and we have these deep, and then I end up going to sleep because I can't.
Yeah, it's hard for us to get our head around the idea of God creating time and space, because we're already within that structure.
Yeah.
So to try and imagine how it was before, we can't really do that, because we're limited in that way. But that was a sort of a beginner's guide to understanding the idea of miracles and the problem of if they happen all the time. The fact that we see the Jewish people saw all those miracles, but it didn't necessarily affect them. And as we know, even when they went they sent spies into the land of Israel. The 10 spies, or they sent 12 spies. 10 of them were bad, and they said, "We can't do it. We can't conquer the land. There's giants there." It's like, hello, you've got God on your side. But they had a problem with it. Okay, plague of darkness. We'll just cover. We've got a few minutes left. Was 6 days long. The first 3 days, the Egyptians couldn't see anything. They could move though, and the second 3 days they couldn't even move. It was like a paralyzing darkness. And during that time, the Jews went into all the Egyptians' homes and they took stock of where all their silver and gold were. And then when it came time for leaving, they said to the Egyptians, "Please give us your gold and silver. We're leaving now. You've not paid us for the last 86 years of slave labor, etc. God has promised us that we're going to empty Egypt of all its wealth." And the Egyptians were saying, "We don't have anything. What are you on about?" And then they were like, "Well, we took an inventory when it was dark, and we know you have a candelabra over here and gold over there." And they took all their emptied Egypt of all its wealth.
And the suggestion is that the Egyptians couldn't see a thing, the Jews could see it.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. The Jews,
Oh, really?
the darkness did not affect
Oh,
the Jews.
so-
Correct. Yeah, there's a debate of whether any of the plagues affected the Jews. Some say none of them did. If a Jew took a cup, in Goshen, they lived in Goshen, and they took the water there wasn't affected. It was only the Nile. Yeah. So it goes on to say, as far as in the Medrash says, an Egyptian would buy water off a Jew because they had regular water, and it would turn to blood as soon as the Egyptian got hold of it. Again, sort of miracles within miracles. There are opinions that say the first 3 plagues affected the Jews and the Egyptians equally, and only from plague 4 onwards did it only affect the Egyptians, because it says in the Torah that God made a distinction. It says the word fudot, basamti fudot. I will make a distinction between the Jews and the Israelites and the Egyptians. But this idea of paralyzing darkness, normally in the United Synagogue, they make this Shabbat mental health Shabbat, because the idea of a darkness that paralyzes you, that you can't move, like it was so thick they couldn't move, relates to the idea of someone suffering from depression, or that they just can't imagine a way of getting out of it when someone's in that situation. It's a little bit like what the darkness was in Egypt. They just couldn't move, and they felt like completely stuck for 3 days. And a concluding thought, because I'm going to try and keep this to half an hour, because that's one of the selling points of this year. It only goes on for half an hour. The mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh is given. The first mitzvah the Jewish people received as a nation was the calendar. The head of the months was Nisan. And God showed Moshe the moon. And when the moon looks like this, that's the new month. And the Jews throughout history would, when they were in Jerusalem, 2 witnesses would see the new moon. They would go up to the Beth Din, the Beis Din, and say, "We've seen the new moon." They would interrogate them to make sure it all make sense. Also astronomically, is that the right word? And then they would declare the new month, Rosh Chodesh. Now you would think the Jewish people are slaves still until they actually get out and cross the sea and get out of there. Then when the Egyptians were chasing after them, they're like, "Come on, we're slaves. We just want to get out of here. We don't really care about the calendar right now. Rosh Chodesh can wait." But it's a beautiful idea, and Rabbi Sachs brings it in the notes here, that when someone has control over time, that's how you know that they are a free man. A person that's free and a slave, they both can work very hard, but a slave keeps working until he's told he can stop. Yeah, he doesn't have control when he works or when he doesn't work. Whereas when a person has control over their time, they are free in that way, that they can recalibrate and appreciate what they're doing. So as we know, we have all the Chagim, Shabbat, once a week. We stop, we rest, we spend time with family, we consider what we're doing with our lives. Even when we eat, we have to stop, and we bench, we say thank you before and after. And of course, 3 times a day we pray, Shachris, Mincha, Mariv. Again, because by taking that time out, by having control over our time, that makes us free. That enables us to live fulfilled lives. But a slave doesn't have that. He doesn't have any control. So by giving them the calendar and Rosh Chodesh and fixing the calendar from Nisan onwards, the Jewish people gained another level of freedom there. And that's why it was important that they got that mitzvah at that point. And that was the first mitzvah the Jewish people received.
And when was it received? Sorry, exactly.
So Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the first Rosh Chodesh, Moshe, God showed Moshe what the moon would look like. In the actual Parsha, we find the actual chapter. Bedo is chapter 12. Yeah. Chapter 12, the beginning of chapter 12. Vayom Hashem Moshe, Ve'el Aaron, Ve'eretz Mitzrayim Lemor. In here, 435, but it's beginning of chapter 12. HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chadoshim. This month shall be the first of the months. Rishon hu lachem l'chad she'ashana. The first of the months for the months of the year. And then at that point, they were instructed about all the laws of Pesach. That they got a 2-week warning. In 2 weeks' time, this is what you need to do. You need to take a sheep or a lamb and shecht it and put the blood on the doorposts and eat it with matzah and maror. And then the question arises that we say Seder night, why do we eat matzah? He says because the dough didn't have time to rise, yeah? But that's not really the reason. It says here 2 weeks before Pesach, you need to eat matzah with the Korban Pesach. Nothing to do with leaving in a hurry. But we'll pick that up next week as we move on. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, all.
everybody.
See you soon.
Richard, I just saw your comment. Thank you. There's Anadis. Thank you. Okay,
Yeah.
good night all.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Okay, thanks very much. See you on Sunday.
See you soon. Bye.
At the Holocaust Memorial.